This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. So what do you think, Sola? Should we start or wait a few minutes?
Just 2 minutes by 13:10 to start. Let's just have 2 minutes and see if others will join us. But while we're waiting for
This meeting is being recorded.
good afternoon from everyone. Good morning and good evening. If you're in the Pacific, it will be around midnight somehow. Thank you very much for joining us for today's meeting. We appreciate those who were with us yesterday. We're very grateful, and we had some wonderful, lively discussion. Today, we would like to continue and then hopefully move on with where we stopped yesterday. We have some interesting presentations today. We hope that today also would, lead to an interesting discussion that will allow us to move this discussion forward. So thank you very much for joining us. We are very grateful. Briefly, if we can quickly introduce ourselves, that would be appreciated before we start the presentation. My name is Olushola Adioye. If I can start with myself, I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. I work with small-scale fishery in the coastal waters of Lagos, the lagoons, the freshwater, and then at the coast of Atlantic Ocean. I majorly work with the stakeholders, particularly on how to plan, sustainable fishery in area where we don't have marine protected area, and where the oceans and the waters are, open to anyone for use. As a result of this, it greatly caused fishery decline. So this is what I've been working on for the past 5 years. So it's a privilege to be part of this meeting. So thank you very much for joining us. I would like to start with Jay. Could you please help us by introducing yourself? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Sola. I'm Jay Perlman, and I work with IEEE France for my European work, and I'm co-chair of the Ocean Best Practice System, had a long-term interest in ocean best practices, and I was very fortunate to work with Cisco Werner and Peter Hogan in setting this meeting 2 years ago, which was a very, very good discussion. And I'm looking forward to this session in what does the future bring and how do we work best practices in the areas of wild catch and particularly the coastal communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Christian, can we meet you?
Good morning, good evening. My name is Christian Munoz. I work in the Institute of Marine Research in Norway. I'm fully employed for the EF Nansen program. There is a global program for science and capacity development in fisheries research and management. That is funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Norway and executed and coordinated together with FAO. I am part of the OBPS steering group and also had the pleasure to take part in the previous fisheries session that was organized in the Ocean Best Practices workshop that was hosted in 2020. And yeah, here I am taking part on this and seeing how we can leverage best practices for fisheries within the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. Angela, can you hear me? Can we meet you, please? Angela, are you there? Okay, Sophia, can we meet you? Okay, Anthony, can we meet you?
again, everyone, and thanks for having me again today. I'm Anthony Panyoko, and presently working at the Aquaculture Institute in Germany, Helgoland precisely. And I'm a marine ecologist. I work with zooplankton, but my previous work was on integrated coastal management, focusing on the small-scale fisheries sector in Cameroon. And so, yeah, so basically that's it about me, and I'll be giving a presentation on the work I did before on fisheries sector and especially fisheries management. So thanks.
Thank you, Anthony. Sophia, can you hear us? Okay. Okay, Sophia is saying that she's our microphone is not working. So also Angela, the microphone is not working. Angela is from Dominican Republic. She works with Council, Dominican Republic Council for Fishery and Aquaculture. Thank you very much for joining us. For Sophia, Sophia is joining us from Ecuador. Currently, she works in the Geographic Institute of the Navy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I would like to give the floor to Jay to give us some kind of background introduction before we move to the first presentation. Could you do that, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Sola. I think maybe rather than giving a long introduction, maybe Christian, do you have the background on the sessions from workshop 4? Are they available?
Yeah, sure. They are actually in the themes, the theme Z drive. Let me rescue it. Do you want me to share it? Or
I would
both?
suggest we share it. Anthony, you were in the session this morning or yesterday morning rather. So you've seen that also. Maybe just give an abbreviated version then, Christian, with the objectives and the directions, and that would be a nice foundation for discussion after the presentations are done.
Google Drive folders. I'm just entering and rescuing the presentation while we are talking. I'm almost there. Just a second, please. Here we are. Okay.
I would say one thing while Christian is doing that. One of the challenges that we faced in the last 3 or 4 years is collecting and then documenting practices by the indigenous fisheries. And that's in Africa, it's in the Pacific Islands and in South America. We were looking at how to go about doing that, and we found it to be a major challenge. And one of the questions that then comes up quickly is how important is that to document, and who would read the documents? And it may be that we need to think about, when we think about best practices in fisheries, who's our target audience? Who will work with us to do the documentation, et cetera. And I think you understand where I'm going here, is understanding some of the challenges in creating what we'll call common methods or commonly used methods. And I asked the question of people in the Canadian Arctic, because traditionally the lessons learned, that the knowledge is an oral transfer, basically done by grandparents to children, or grandchildren really. And they said, well, we already have the system, it already works. I'm teaching in the family, that's fine. And I said, well, do you ever need to document these? And then the comment came back, which surprised me, was that that wasn't the transfer orally was not occurring as much anymore between having mobile phones and all the other things that the young people have. The discussions among family are not the same. And then COVID came and the older generation disappeared. I mean, there was significant issues with the older generation and the virus. And some of that knowledge was lost. And the dialogue then became, well, do we need to document practices of the various local fishers, et cetera, et cetera? I'd like to suggest that as a topic of discussion because it's not one that I clearly know the answer to, but can be very important. Christian, maybe I can turn it to you if you're ready.
Yes, I am. I'm sharing my screen right now. Okay. So yes, as I mentioned yesterday, this presentation is basically the report from the Fisheries Working Group that we had in the workshop 2 years ago, and this is on behalf of more than 40 participants, and was led by Peter Hogan from the Institute of Marine Research in Norway, Cisco Werner from NOAA Fisheries in the US, and Marina Wichman from the Ministry of Marine Resources in the Cook Islands. So we had a major focus on three main pillars related to fisheries. One for data collection, another day for stock assessments, and the third day for management and advice. So first of all, there was outcomes from these sessions. The most important, or well, the fundamental one in the beginning was why or what we were hoping to achieve by defining best practices for fisheries. And these four things came out from those discussions. One, like giving people a leg up, shortcuts, converging methods is a very important thing, developing standardized and transparent quality assured processes, and a lot of emphasis was put as well on not telling people what they must or must not do. So these were four major elements to consider when developing best practices in fisheries. The dimensions where these fisheries are developed were also very important and was one of the more discussed issues. First of all, differentiating all these pillars of data collection, stock assessment, and management and advice in these three main dimensions: locally, regionally, and globally. Being the regional scale, for sure, the one that was taking more attention, or where most of the effort is really done. So there were some key messages after the every session for data collection. These four topics were the most important or most discussed, like the use of various systems and novel methods, the importance of metadata and sharing this metadata, introducing or using big data as a new paradigm for moving forward for better understanding and management of the fisheries resources. And of course, all this put in one single box, the importance of applying the FAIR principles to all these issues, the FAIR data guiding principles. So for the stock assessment, which includes all how the data is being transformed to create models for predicting or generating forecasts in order to take decisions afterwards. So these four messages were stated out. So for the stock assessment modeling, the best practices produced should be deposited into a repository, such can be, of course, OBPS, and following the FAIR principles again. That was again very emphasized. Strong emphasis was put in using or supplying more capacity development for using all these models, and using community modeling approaches to do that. And also the part of the keep developing management strategy evaluations, best practices also was something that was noted that needs to be still more encouraged and incentivized. Finally, for the management and advice block, these were the key elements that were on the table or where the discussions were around. I'm not going into them as I am really summarizing this, and it's not my full area of expertise. So these were the major items discussed, like of course the importance of dialogue between not only scientists but also with managers and the rest of the stakeholders, clarifying management objectives, having access and timely access to documentation and procedures depending on the framework that we are moving, using the best available science and peer-reviewed methods as much as we can. It's not always the case. Striving for advice for consensus and independent of the managers, and using the stakeholder buy-in approach. And last but not least, the emphasis for moving forward or keep developing or introducing the ecosystem-based approach and incorporating, of course, or strongly considering how the effects of climate change are really being or having a real impact and help us a lot to understand how the stocks are changing in fisheries. So as key messages or overview after all these sessions, these were probably the key final summaries of this. Fisheries are complex and diverse, ranging from industrialized high-tech to artisanal subsistence, but although some common messages are rising or emerging when it comes to best practices for fisheries on that. Transparency is key, including data, methods, and models that need to be accessible through metadata. There is a need for continue developing ecosystem-based management and considering and strongly also including novel technologies comprised by satellite, unmanned systems, genetics, big data, etc. That, between other things, may really contribute to diminish these differences between data poor and data rich areas. So, and this is practically the end. Where next? What were the next steps for this? These were the four next proposed the roadmap proposed from that working group. What you can see in green is what has been already achieved right now after 2 years, which was considering appropriate stage for aquaculture and creating specific aquaculture sessions during the following workshops. And we have already done that, and Jay and others have been addressing this thing thoroughly this year. And then what you see in yellow is what is kind of ongoing. First of all, inviting the fisheries community to join OBPS and keep evolving and engaging this production or evolution of best practices for fisheries. And this is the second year now that we are organizing a fisheries session. So we are on it, just creating this snowball effect to engage more community related to fisheries for really make this happen. And then two things more. One is getting involved in the UN decade. We have been now granted or endorsed as a UN program, as a UN decade program through this ocean practices program. And we, through this program, there are different actions that can be undertaken in relation with fisheries, best practices for and fisheries. And last, and it's not done, and we very much hope that we can move this forward through the session this year, is the writing of a short perspective paper in Frontiers in Marine Science to help stimulating or following up this working group and this evolution of best practices for fisheries. Just very quickly, the Ocean Practices program that has been endorsed from the OBPS. Yeah, basically, it wants to support all ocean stakeholders in securing equitable sharing and collectively advancing ocean best practices. And this is basically for improving interoperability and fostering trust and facilitating training. So the global participation will keep evolving, keep growing. We have a few major objectives from this program. First of all, keep incentivizing and facilitating the continuous development, adoption, and evolution of methodologies into best practices, which well, is together with the second objective, having a trusted system that really also supports this co-development and convergence from the methods to the final best practices. We work, or the program will try to work very hard to keep improving in the interoperability phase of this system, and this phase passes for incorporating in the system both fair and care principles. And of course, since we are not the only ones that have a methodology management system in the globe, what we strive or we really aim for is facilitating or leading at least a process for federating different networks that naturally will facilitate also or really accelerate processes like fostering community-led capacity development activities, that it's one of the main pillars of this program as well. There are many actions that can be done in this program that we can discuss later, but it passes through helping out on the system to keep consolidating this discourse for some best practices on how this process goes when a methodology is created until it gets up being a best practices. So how this life cycle kind of can be better tailored or improved. There can be specific activities also for keep implementing digital infrastructure around the system. Participating into basically coordination of activities, working groups, task teams dedicated to specific areas, as it could be, for example, fisheries, or undertaking, for example, a very specific pilot activities, say on the development of technologies, but also strictly focused on capacity development. Last but not least, just a very few description. When I talked before on the possibility of writing a perspective paper, that would be something that is not a big paper. It would be a first step for consolidating the fisheries sector, the best practices in fisheries into this system. And this basically this perspective article would consist in a viewpoint of a specific area of research or investigation, where we discuss the advances and future directions, where accurate, where the opinions or the perspective of the authors can be stated there, and also presenting work of other or citing work and actions from other authors in it. It would be like 4 or 5 pages with around 3,000 words, and not much more. It's something that could be relatively quickly, and we have many people that could support also the creation of this perspective article, ranging from the more than 40 participants that we had in the previous sessions and the ones that we are having in these sessions these days. So yeah, that's just information about the Frontiers in Marine Science best practices in ocean observing research topic that was created specifically for ocean best practices system, and is where all the peer-reviewed methods are being submitted. As you see, the figures are it's now growing in community and in impact and in traffic all around the world. So and this brings us how we can connect the objectives of this session now with what we have as a legacy from the previous working group. These are basically the objectives of these sessions yesterday and today, and the aquaculture sessions last week. And well, what it says here is that basically it can be in more or less degree connected specifically also to this decade UN Decade Program actions or activities, and the writing of the perspective paper that I was mentioning now. So basically, as desired outcomes from these sessions, these fisheries sessions, what we really expect or would like to see is in these 3 points. Perspective article, who would like to contribute, and what could be the potential topics to be included, how this could be structured. We've been talking a lot about the dimensions of fisheries, whether they are local, global, or regional, which type of fisheries, where do we put the focus in the data collection, in the stock assessment, in the management and advice. So there are different transversal and vertical dimensions that, to be condensed in a paper, needs probably a bit of thought. Then we would like to have or state some recommendations for the Ocean Practices Program implications. Yesterday we were discussing even about the possibility of really creating a task team in OBPS to start making this happen, starting from the perspective article, but then getting more engaged or engaging more the community into this task team to really make this happen, this adoption and evolution of methods into best practices from the fisheries perspective. And ultimately, we would love to, and we are in a constant process always of gathering available methods to be included in the repository that we have in the system. So all possible methods that all of you guys are aware that have been either successful or that they are good candidates to become best practices in relation to fisheries would be very welcome to know where they are, or we can find them, so we can dump them into the system. And that's all from my side. So I hope I haven't taken too much time, and leave also Anthony to give his presentation. I'm not sure if we should start with the presentation, or anybody has a specific question before starting with Anthony.
Do we have any questions? Okay, if there is no question, I just want to add this before we take Anthony's presentation. Technically, today we're supposed to have 3 presentations. One from Nick from Australia. I got a message from him that that he's sorry he won't be able to join us because it's actually past midnight in Australia, New South Wales. So he got it wrong. So he couldn't, he told me later that he was unable to join us. Issa Elegbede is supposed to also join us. Hopefully before Anthony finished his presentation, he will join us. But if he doesn't join us, fine. We have quite a lot of things to discuss from what Jay said and what we've just heard from Christian. So I guess we have quite a lot of things to actually discuss in order to move forward with the objectives that have been, laid out before us. So if we don't have any question, I think this is the right time to take Anthony's presentation and see how it fits into the discussion that Jay and Christian, laid before us. So Anthony, if you're ready, the floor is yours. Thank you.
We can't hear you, Anthony. You're muted.
Sorry.
Now we can.
All right. So I'll try to share my screen now.
Okay.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, but
I'll try to maximize it. Full screen. Is it okay?
Okay, good.
All right. So thanks for having me, and I'll apologize because this is I had to do this at very short notice, and I put a few things together, and some things might not be in place, and so. But I think the message I want to convey will definitely be conveyed. So my presentation today is not to show you the best practice or the best practices in fisheries management in Cameroon. Rather, it is the contrary. I would like to show you the worst practices when it comes to fisheries. And that is the case of my country, Cameroon. And then I will propose what I believe to be the best practice for that particular part of the country, of the world. And this work is part of my master's thesis, which I did in Xiamen University, China in 2011. And I am also quite disappointed to say that since then, nothing has really changed. Even though I went there and did these studies, and I talked to a few people who are kind of in charge of dealing with fisheries management, but nothing has moved forward actually. So I'll move to the next slide. So basically, I would introduce to you the fisheries sector in Cameroon, and my focus is on the small scale fisheries and the livelihood aspect of fisheries. And the current state of fisheries and fisheries management in Cameroon, and the problems affecting the sector, and then my recommendation, which is integrated coastal management as best practice to achieve sustainable fisheries in Cameroon. Oh, this is like a duplication. Okay, so the Cameroon coastline. Very briefly, Cameroon is located in a very strategic position, the coastline of Cameroon, in the Gulf of Guinea. This the map you see there. And my work focused in this particular estuary. So Cameroon has a network of estuaries along its coastline with very dense mangrove forest. And a very rich, or what was supposed to be a rich fisheries sector. And the name Cameroon actually comes from the Portuguese who, when they sailed to the west coast of Africa, they found themselves in this place. They found huge swarms of shrimps jumping in and out of the Vori estuary, which is here. And so they named that place Rio dos Cameros, so the river of shrimps. And so this is what the country was known for, high abundance of shrimps. And you would not be surprised that if you go there today, you would probably not find much shrimps anymore. And in addition to that, this estuary has one peculiarity in that it is home to the biggest city in Cameroon, which is Douala. And Douala is the economic capital of Cameroon.
Attention.
And
Prepare my slides.
And 95% of the population and the industries, as well as the movement in and out of ships in the country, go through Douala. And so we can already see the amount of pressure which the estuary is subjected to. Okay, so basically the Cameroon estuary is very rich, not only in terms of biological resources, but it's also very rich cultural area. And so we have the mangrove forest, which provides security and safety to the coastal inhabitants as a result of the barrier effect, protecting them from high flood waters. And also the supporting services and the regulating services. We have a lot of sand mining going on in the area as well. And so a lot of people make money out of these small activities. But the most important activity in the area is fishing. And in addition to fishing, we have other subsidiary activities related to that. For example, boat construction and fish smoking and fish transportation. And so we have a large proportion of the population of this area that depends on fishing or some fish related activity for their livelihood. And therefore, this area is not, the condition of this area is not only, it does not only provide a healthy environment or an environment for biological life to thrive, but also an environment where humans need to survive, or conditions which humans need to survive. And so we have over 46 small fishing villages in this estuary, just in this estuary, although there are lots of other villages along the coastline. And the population at the time when I did this work, population was about 22,000 people in these villages. And these villages fall within three subdivisions in the Vuri estuary area: Douala 4, Douala 2, and Douala 6. And most of the fishing happens in Douala 6 subdivision. And then the fish markets are mostly located in Douala 2 and Douala 4 subdivisions, as well as the main city of Douala. So we have, in this area, we have a large conglomerate of different socio-professional groups that live together and that relate with each other and depend on each other. And this includes fishermen, fish retailers, fish smokers, mangrove wood vendors, boat builders, transporters, and also we have policymakers, the department in charge of fisheries and environmental management. And but we have major problems, and from what I just described there previously, you can already see that if we have all of these people living together and working together, and we have industries in Douala that have to dispose of their waste, and we have large populations of people living in slum-like conditions, we definitely would have situations like this we see in these pictures. And so we have areas that are transformed, mangrove areas that are transformed into dumping grounds for domestic waste and industrial waste. And these studies have found a decrease in fish population of over 15% per year due to mortality, migration, overfishing. And it is actually shocking that a country with very rich fisheries resources as Cameroon is a net importer of fish. And it has been like that for decades. And the situation doesn't seem to be changing. And also studies have found that the fish that is even being consumed in the area is laden with chemical contaminants. And that is also very concerning. There are lots of other issues. For instance, unregulated sand mining in this area, in this picture here, which I took in 2011. People just need to just go there and start digging out sand. And so because of that, there's saltwater intrusion, there's an increase in flooding, and there's the destruction of mangroves. So people who cut mangroves for building and for use as fuel wood, they're destroying the mangroves without any or very little regulation. And directly related to the fisheries sector or to the fishing activity, we notice that the fish that is being caught, the sizes have been reducing year by year. And now the fish that is sold in the local markets is mostly like very little fish, with very little control, very little health and sanitation control. And also the fact that in the fish markets themselves, there's very little regulation. And the gear type, the nets that have to be used, there's almost no control. So basically, there's nothing like regulation, almost nothing like regulation in the fishery sector of Cameroon and the Cameroon estuary. And the only aspect which I saw, which is more like where you can find the presence of regulators, is that there's an office in the main fisheries locality called UPER, and that office is, the main role is to collect fish tax. So they're mainly to collect taxation of the fishing activity and not for regulation. And so that's the disappointing part of my work. And so it was a very painful experience doing this work in Cameroon, although I come from there, but I never knew how bad the situation was. And so I didn't limit my work to just looking at the fishing activity itself, but I also looked at the living condition of the people living there, so the social aspect of the fishery sector. So I looked at, so the problems which I found was that the people who found themselves working as fishermen or fish vendors or fish smokers, mostly people who could not find any other job somewhere else. And so they had to resort to doing menial jobs as porters, carrying fish from the boats to the market. And so we have the largest population of people in the fishery sector actually was these people. Limited employment and very low living standards. And the high cost of living because every other thing was expensive. And the living condition, the state of the environment was so bad because of very low hygienic conditions there. And the health problems as well were some of the most concerning ones, because these areas where the main fishing areas are the areas where cholera is a major issue. And these are usually the centers for cholera outbreaks in this area, in the estuary area. So this place has a lot of issues. And apart from those issues, what I also found was the numerous conflicts that existed between industrial and commercial fisheries. So we had foreign industrial fleets coming very close to the coastline to fish, and that resulted in conflicts with the small-scale fishermen who already did not have enough to catch. And then there was the local versus the foreign fishermen. So the situation, because of the very little regulation, people could come from neighboring countries to the coastline of Cameroon and start fishing, and then they used to result in tension between the local and the foreign fishermen, and sometimes even led to loss of lives. And also we had industries versus the fishing grounds. So the indiscriminate disposal of industrial waste that led to fish deaths and also pollution of the fisheries. And then the multiple use conflicts. So because of very little regulation, very little in terms of, or no marine spatial planning. So there was shipping, there was fishing, there was industries and everything happening in the same area without any regulation. So these multi-sectoral conflicts led to most of the problems which I mentioned earlier. And this had a trickle-down effect on the well-being of the populations living in the area. Normally, in an environment, we would expect that the people benefit from all the services provided by the ecosystem, as we see in the ecosystem and constituent well-being model here. But in the Cameroon estuary, it was the reverse. The people did not benefit from the ecosystem services. And instead, because of poor regulation and the poor state of the environment, the ecosystem condition was even made worse. And so it's a kind of a vicious cycle. As the population keeps increasing, the ecosystem keeps degrading, and the condition keeps getting worse. And so I summarize the problems, the drivers of the problems which I found, and into this table here. And the multiple use conflicts was the main category which I came up with. And poor fisheries management and the top-down approach to fisheries management, which doesn't include the primary stakeholders, was another major issue that led to the problems which the fishery sector and the development of the area is facing. And then we have fisheries legislation that only exists in paper. And then there's the poor environmental management and multiple conflicting mandates. We shall see some of this as I go further. So here we see, this is a framework that summarizes the conflicting fisheries mandates, which is a good example of the sectoral, centralized, or the worst form of governance that we expect in an area that faces multiple interacting and complex challenges. So we have the estuary, which is a major ecosystem in Cameroon, where the main city and the main industrial hub is located, and which has a lot of environmental, social, and economic issues that lead to the degradation of the environment, destruction of mangroves, and resulting in flooding and high incidence of diseases like cholera. But then we don't have a specific agency or government institution that is in charge of managing these problems in an integrated way. And so we have over 8 or 9 different ministries that are in charge of forestry, and the ministry in charge of forestry has to deal with mangroves. The ministry in charge of the MINEPIA is the ministry in charge of livestock, and livestock includes fisheries. And so fisheries don't have a specific mandate. And then we have the Ministry of Environment that only deals with environmental issues. And then you have the local communities, the local councils, and you have the Ministry of Health. And like I mentioned earlier, this area is the hotspot for cholera and other water-related diseases that are recurrent yearly. And so all of these are separate ministries that do not have very much in common in terms of working together. So this framework was what I produced to show them that this is what is actually accentuating the problems we're facing in this area, and that we need to change this model in order to be able to move forward. And what I propose as good practice to move forward and to change this problem and to redress the current state of this area is I'll present in the following points: to redefine the concept of sustainable development, because they do not have any concept in terms of how they define sustainable development. So the area is more like an area where everything goes and nothing is planned. And so we need to redefine what we understand by sustainable development. And we need to implement and operationalize integrated coastal management after we redefine sustainable development. And that has to have fisheries management at its core, at its center. And then we have to now improve fisheries governance and management along involving the local communities and based on ecosystem-based principles. So to redefine sustainable development, I produced a simple model which puts the environment in the center, and so which combines both environment, society, and economy in one framework without looking at them as individual components. And then putting also the economic sustainability model together with this sustainable development model will give us what we now call sustainable blue economy. But if we only look at the economy, we want to collect as much money from the industrial fishermen. We want to collect as much taxes from the small scale fishermen without really focusing on what's the state or the status of the resource itself. Without focusing on the environmental condition, the environmental health, we would lose our resources, and that will cause lead to a worse situation than what we even have now. So I propose this model of sustainable development, and then I propose I suggest that use the application of the ICM cycle, which is developed by the PEMC, an organization in Southeast Asia that has done a lot of work in implementing integrated coastal management in Southeast Asia. And so I modified the PEMC approach to see how it can fit into the situation in Cameroon in an ICM system, which I propose as the Cameroon ICM system. And in this system, I put fisheries and fisheries management at the center. The reason being that if we focus on the sustainable management of fisheries, every other problem which which I mentioned earlier will fall into place. For instance, in order to have a healthy fisheries, we need a healthy environment. And to have a healthy environment, we need to regulate other activities that affect the fisheries. And with that will come sustainable livelihoods, as the local fishermen would make more money from healthy fisheries, and also their living conditions will improve as well as their health conditions. So that was my idea, that if we focus on, we put fisheries at the center of the ICM system in Cameroon, we would achieve all the other economic and social objectives which we would want to achieve. And that will tie into the UN agendas as well as the Millennium Development Goals for the area. And that will mean that we would.
Hello, Anthony.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Please, could you ramp up in?
Yeah, that's the last slide.
5 minutes?
All right,
Thank
so
you.
that would mean that we would have to integrate all the different sectors that are in charge of environmental management, livestock management, health management, bring them together in a single legislative framework, and also integrate the scientists, as well as bring in the local communities and the actual actors on the ground to work together in this integrated coastal management system. And with that, this is the integrated governance framework which I proposed, and that shows how to integrate the different sectoral agencies to have an integrated fisheries and estuarine management system for the Cameroon estuary. So basically, that's about it. And I believe that if this system was implemented, we will have in Cameroon estuary and in Cameroon coastline in general, we'll have sustainable fisheries, and we'll have a sustainable blue economy. And that would really push the country towards the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals. And yeah, that's it. And I think that's the end of my talk. Yeah. So I conclude by saying that implementing ICM in this area is not an option, but a moral obligation, not for the sake of the environment and not for the sake of the economy, but for the sake of humanity. And of course, the environment and the economy will benefit immensely. So that was my proposal for good practice for fisheries management and the development of fisheries sector in Cameroon. Thanks. And sorry for exceeding time.
Yes, thank you, Anthony, for taking us through the presentation. It's quite informative, and for majority of us that are close to the subject area, we are very much familiar with the challenges you presented. And I think the purpose of this gathering, particularly for the OBPS, is to put together best practices that can be used to address these daunting challenges. That is the purpose of this meeting. So thank you very much. We don't have much time. I just want to ask if Jay, Christian, and everyone in the group has one or two things to say before we quickly move to the second presentation, so that we can spend much of the rest of the time for brainstorming and see how this we did up. Anyone, if you have anything to say, you can jump in quickly, and then let's hear within 5 minutes, then we'll move to the next presentation.
I may have a question, but okay, I'll jump in.
Go on, go on.
Thank you for this very unfortunate but very well tailored presentation. Of course, the topic it's very bad to see, but I really enjoyed the presentation. I think that you presented very well the reality of what is happening there and the complexity of the problem. I was just wondering that in terms of when it comes to developing best practices for this particular small scale fisheries, which I know that in the previous session, that was something that wasn't much attended, and there is of course a need for that. Did you, in your work before starting tailoring this model, did you consider whether this model can also be kind of benefiting or kind of interoperable with other regions where small fisheries are also affected? I mean, is this model also, do you think that it could work in other small scale fisheries in other countries, or is it something interoperable, or have you thought on that? Or
Yeah, if I may respond very fast. Yes, actually, what motivated me to do this work is the fact that I was shocked when I went to China and I saw what was being done there in terms of management, resource management, and especially fisheries management. And so what I propose here is something similar to what is done in China as well. And so, yeah, ICM is a global phenomenon. We can implement it anywhere, and it is mainly for solving multiple complex challenges, such that we do not have the effects which we generally would expect when we have sectoral or multiple use conflicts in the case of sectoral management. So yes, I did consider this, and I know that it can easily, but in order to implement this in any other area, we need to first understand the specificities of the problems on the ground, and then tailor our ICM model to address those issues.
Yeah.
okay, thank you, Anthony.
Any more questions? Because I just didn't want to add Anthony a question, but if you have one question, any more questions, please. Jay, do you have some thoughts on this presentation?
I would simply reflect that this is as hard a problem as I've seen anywhere, because what it sounds like is there's overfishing as the fish become smaller and smaller, but you can't take away the rights to fish because you just destroy the livelihood. And so there needs to be some way in your integrated coastal management to sustain the population during a transition time. And I'm not sure I know how to do that, but it would be interesting to discuss that later, after we're done with the presentations. But thank you, Anthony, for your talk. It's excellent, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I don't want us to waste much time, but I would have loved to ask Anthony if your work was done in 2011. Am I correct? 2011, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So if it was done in 2011, it was actually around the same time that Cameroon opened the southern port, I think the port of Douala. So the oil, the petroleum coming from Chad. So do you consider the impact of this on the small scale fishery, particularly in this estuary? I don't want you to think about to give us a lengthy response to that now. But I think you should think about this and continue to ruminate over it. What could be the impact of this now in this modern time on the the model you have introduced? Would that have implication on it? Is it going to dominate this aspect of sustainable blue economy that we are are advancing in Africa, particularly in oil-rich country? What could be the impact? So if we have time, at the end of the second presentation, we will be able to take that off, but have that at the back of your mind. So without much ado, I would like to invite Issa from Lagos State University. Interestingly, we will not be talking about Africa, we'll be talking about Canada, Atlantic Canada in particular. So if you can hear me briefly, could you please introduce yourself and then take the floor? Please, we have very limited time, pardon me, as much as you can manage time. Let's quickly take the presentation so that we can have some time to do some brainstorming and then keep to the objective of our presentation. Issa, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much, Olushola. It was a wonderful presentation from my co-presenter, Dr. Anthony Nda. And I want to say that I really learned a lot, especially talking about the situation in Cameroon. Yes, so, sorry, can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
We can, but now
Yes.
we perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So thanks so much. So today, like Dr. Olushola mentioned, that we are taking our private jets and moving gradually from Africa down to North America. We are around, I think, around the same Atlantic. Now, so this was a research project done in Canada, and it was based on supporting the Mi'kmaq leadership in developing an indigenous-based certification for American lobster commercial fisheries of Nova Scotia. And based on this, it's a research project funded by the Ocean Frontier Institute, the Dalhousie University Robin Rigby Trust, and as well university from Germany with support of Mi'kmaq Conservation Group called the MCG. Now, based on the background of representation and the outline, we'll be talking about the objective and findings and including acknowledgements. Now, according to the United Nations FAO, it is statutory to understand that until we strengthen and promote indigenous food systems, then attaining or achieving zero hunger will be realistic. But because globally we've tried to neglect indigenous or traditional practices towards the ocean decade, and we could say that so many problems you're still facing around the SDG pertaining to SDG 14 are still there. So, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so now, so the objective of this discussion will be we looked at evaluating the potentials and benefits of indigenous certification for the lobster fisheries so as to improve the socioeconomic aspect and livelihood of the indigenous communities, and as well looking at the uncertainties, gaps, and challenges that we could harness with the benefits towards the communities, and as well to identify the component of this certification that is indigenous based for the lobster fisheries. Now, for the situation in Nova Scotia and in Canada, it's a fact that more than 10,000 licensed lobster harvesters in LFAs. And based on this, the lobster population has been assessed as either LD or known because there are inadequate data, especially with the indigenous-based fishery. But it is also important to know for the entire Canada that Canada has been able to produce about 942 million of this species in 2014, $million. And besides, this species has been estimated about 925,000 tons has been sold in frozen form, indicating the prospects, the opportunities in the species, in these lobster fisheries. However, the local communities and the indigenous communities, majorly the indigenous community, are yet to harness all these benefits. Now, again, looking at the lobster fisheries, it's the largest crustacean in the world by weight. It's called Humerus americanus, and it's been distributed and exported around the Atlantic, even beyond the Atlantic. And biologically, this species is nocturnal, and it could be found majorly around the Gulf of Maine, around Nova Scotia, including the southern Gulf of St. Lawrence. So in terms of the concern for this research, because it is possible that there will be cases of overfishing in the future, and that is why there is need to look at the traditional and indigenous based approach through certifications to be able to manage the fisheries. Now, some brief statistics. Number one, you can see based on this graph that the lobster is one of the most valuable seafood exports from the region. And you can see that the captured, the lobster, you can see it's increasing. And since 2015, 2016 downward, the harvest has been stable. So, and this is a signal that if it's not managed adequately, it could lead to overfishing. And that is why there is need to explore some of these tools, indigenous-based tool. Now, apart from the previous slide, you can see the total landings from Canada. You can see this is the total landing from Canada, and you can see same again, it's not that increasing drastically, it's becoming undulating around recent times. So now in 2017, it has the highest, one of the highest exports, and that is around $2 million, about 52% of the entire fish stock from Canada. And by volume, its live products, about 57% has been produced. So you can see the LFA landings that I've mentioned so far around the Atlantic region. You can see there are a lot of areas, but majorly it's been produced around Newfoundland region, and this is Nova Scotia, which is one of the regions that we are looking at. And you can see the huge amount of production that we've gotten there, and it is where the indigenous people, the Mi'kmaq community, belong. So now the American lobster fishery location is where it's been located with the indigenous community around the 26 ALFAs. So major export of the lobster fisheries include the United States, China, then Japan, then down to France. Now, for this study, we're able to explore both mixed method research, and which include getting secondary data from literatures, and as well meeting with the Mi'kmaq conservation group, the MCG group communities to discuss about getting valuable results. And with this, we're able to explore about 8,000 documents for the assessment, and using software called MassQDA to analyze the qualitative parameters. Then apart from this, this research was also coded in teams and sub-teams to generate frameworks. Now, the pillars of the project. Now, the project is mainly to see how we could promote livelihood of indigenous communities, exploring this innovative tool, and as well to see how environmental impact could be reduced on the fisheries. Besides, to as well see how policies and indigenous governance of the fisheries could be supported. Now, our findings and outcomes. Now, looking at the first objective, that is to look at the potentials and benefits of this certification to the indigenous community, that is to look at how we could improve socioeconomic aspect and livelihood of the indigenous communities. Number one, we're able to get that benefits that could be derived from this indigenous certification would include increased control over the fishery resources and management, including stewardship, and as well allowing these communities to be involved in decision making. Secondly, to the benefits would as well extend to having greater fish resources and protecting the environmental resources, and also having economic benefits and capacity for the Mi'kmaq communities in all. Then also improving stakeholders' engagement and having direct access to international markets by the indigenous communities. Now, in addition, there's need to address the Aboriginal rights, especially talking about the uncertainties surrounding it, and as well to talk about market differentiation of the products and promotion, including getting networks of possible stakeholders to enhance the market, and as well and leaving the commercial scale of these products to the international market, and as well strategizing on best practices on the commercial fisheries that is owned by the community, not individuals. So now the objective 2, talking about the uncertainties, gaps, and challenges towards harnessing this benefit that we have mentioned to the group. Number 1, we need to go back to talk about the strengths of the lobster fisheries. Number 1, the lobster fisheries employs about 25,000 harvesters and 71% of all maritime fishers. Then also it is worth to let us know that the distribution of this species is widespread around this region, and it's possible to process and provide high or huge employment, including strong export demand, because there are high demand for this particular product beyond Canada. So in addition, now talking about objective 2, the uncertainties for objective 2, number 1 is looking at issues surrounding absolute dominance, because the indigenous community have made it clear that locally they want to be in charge and have dominance of their species, because they do not trust anything that is Western. The number 2 is the uncertainties surrounding gaps surrounding translating traditional knowledge by the indigenous community into technical indicators. Now, with this, they are scared they are insecure about manipulating their knowledge. Hence, they are looking at how they can effectively translate or work together with the scientific community to be able to have what is called the two-eyed seeing. Is a term used with the indigenous community in their protocols to be able to merge the traditional knowledge, which is called TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, and the technical TEK, the technical Western knowledge. Besides, there are difficulties that they might not want to adopt external criteria and indicators, because to have a certification that will be all-encompassing and holistic, it is important to look at various criteria, metrics, and indicators that will be able to check if the species, the activity is going towards sustainability. But they are concerned about adopting an external criteria that is not in conformity with their traditional method. Now, all of us know that certification comes with costs. There are issues that find how would they get the costs to maintain certification, including the economic drive and finance to merge it forward. For Marine Stewardship Council, it's an huge amount of money for to have a certification, but for them, because they will need to have external examiner, accreditors, and including certifiers, which means they will need a huge amount of money to do this. Then apart from this, there's need to give them back their allocation, the assets of their territory, so that they can adequately control, have stewardship of these resources, and to be able to enhance and explore the economic benefit. Then likewise, to participate in governance, to share responsibility and accountability. They are skeptical that the conventional, the government organization will not give them that chance to have a shared responsibility and to be accountable for these resources. So now, the uncertainties that that I have mentioned include the market potentials, having market access barrier, consumers' perception, the price premium issues, and also who bears the cost. Is it the government, the indigenous community, or the get external grant from different sources? Now, apart from the objective 1 and 2 that we have mentioned, we will now drive to objective 3, that is to identify the key components of the indigenous certification. Now, with the Mi'kmaq community, they have what is called Netugulimig. Netugulimig is a traditional term that is called sustainability. And with this, they have identified that the principles they would like to adopt would be a sustainable one based on the Netugulimig principle. Number 2, having social benefits that will be sustainable and that will be cultural, and that they will be able to enhance their livelihood. Another thing is an indigenous certification that will be indigenous based, and that would pivot their knowledge, including having guidance and stewards from them, so that they will have full control. Then apart from this, the certification that will as well be able to have full control and governance, including the treaty rights. Besides, it should have compensation from these people that is using their knowledge and resources. And apart from this, to have participation from stakeholders to support and to give trust, because indigenous communities globally are having issues of trust, especially from the government. And lastly, a component of the principle that talks about compliance with all relevant legal and regulatory requirements. So the key component of an indigenous certification would include, number 1, an indigenous governance, operational management, and a lobster certification standard. So now, an indigenous governance will talk about transparency and participating with all stakeholders. That will have public consultations. The number two, having direct openness and market access, including integrity, that is ability to monitor and be able to have integrity with the fisheries. Then majorly, the governance towards recognizing the rights over the lobster fisheries, and as well setting standards and maintenance of these fisheries that will, and as well be able to manage their indigenous based logo, claims, or certificates. Now, second aspect is operational management that talks about accreditation, who is to accredit it. Number two, compliance with all local and international standards, e.g. ISO. And number three, certification that has that talks about the fee structures, inclusiveness, and as well indigenous and technical knowledge. Then lastly, chain of custody that is traceable and has guardians for record keeping and proper management. Then lastly is the lobster certification standards. So these standards will have indicators and criteria that talks about managing the fish stocks and protecting the ecosystem, emphasizing on the indigenous approaches and knowledge, then participating through a community-based engagement, and as well managing those uncertainties that we have mentioned. Then apart from this, to be able to collect data and manage those data adequately, and to have what is called indigenous assessment principles and method that would have indigenous worldview and sustainable economy to the people. Now, so in conclusion, I haven't talked about the objectives of exploring an indigenous-based certification that could promote the indigenous resources towards maintaining and enhancing their livelihood, because various tools have been explored in the past. However, we've tried to place this innovative approach to this community in Canada to be able to see how there can be variations in promoting them, having their well-being sorted out, and as well having independence of the fish resources. And lastly, based on the three key codes of the Decade of Action that talks about, number one, inclusiveness, number two, leaving no one behind, having innovative technology, and as well with a matter of urgency, which talks about looking at exploring this tool to solve the problems pertaining to the indigenous community towards achieving the SDG 14 that we all admire and we all have been crying all about. So on this note, thanks so much for listening. I'm sorry that the network might be fluctuating and might be unstable. It's due to the location that I am presently. So thanks so much, everyone, for listening. Yeah, bye.
No, it's not time to disappear. Thank you very much for the presentation. Of course, I know the time is no longer there for us, but I don't know if anybody quickly want to add one or two questions so that we can just wrap up so that those who want to join the other what's it called, other meeting can quickly join. So thank you very much for this presentation. Like the first presentation, we can see the problem. And then the second presentation is actually telling us that sometimes solution comes with a lot of cost, because sometimes best practices can be difficult to adopt. This is what Dr. Issa is actually, sharing with us. But if you have questions, the floor is still open. Quickly, let's hear your opinion. I apologize from Jay. He has to step to another meeting, so he has left. Any question, please? Anybody is willing to, has one or two things so they can easily jump in and
I may have a question, or well, I don't know. I think this indigenous certification seems a very good way for really giving value to small scale fisheries for sure. Well, I'm sure that they do it in bigger scale as well, but I think that looks like a very good proposal or solution is. And my question was a bit in line with what the same that I asked to Anthony as well, whether are you aware of other, I'm sure you are, other use cases where this indigenous certification has been already implemented and has created success stories in other small scale fisheries around the world? Yeah. Isa, would you be aware of other potential use
Yes.
cases?
Yes. Thanks so much for that interesting and amazing question. Yeah. Globally, there hasn't been any absolutely controlled indigenous based certification for any fisheries globally. However, we have seen the case of a co-managed certification fisheries in Mexico, where the community were able to, the traditional community were able to work with the government to effectively manage the fisheries there. And as well, we've seen cases beyond the Americas, even in Australia, where they have managed these resources. So that is why we are proposing that there's need to support the indigenous community in Canada majorly. However, because we are in a global forum now, and to as well extend it to other environment, other regions where the indigenous community are finding it difficult to explore their resources, to get adequate rights and on the resources, and also to be able to harness the resources towards upgrading their economic well-being and livelihood. So it's an innovative one, which will be an approach that could solve their problems, as indicated in some of the results that they are interested in this process, but they are skeptical about some of these factors. For example, the factor around costs, because managing certification might accrue huge amount of money. But there are, so like I said, in the case of Mexico, we have seen a case where government came on board to give them support and to be able to support them. And afterwards, there was a statistics after the certification in Mexico, and they were able to get reasonable results in improvement in their fisheries. So I would like to say that it's still an innovative one, and we are yet to see a particular indigenous community that will explore this holistically and to have an indigenous based label that will be based on traditional sustainability. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Isa.
yeah, thank you, Christian. Thank you, Isa, for the response. Quite interesting. So we would like to let you know that we will contact you time to time if you can, because you are in best position to look out for some of these wonderful, innovative approach globally with respect to indigenous certification. Because one of the objectives of this meeting is to, gather as many documents as possible that can be placed in the repository that anyone can lay hand on, so that such methodology, such innovative outcome can be used in other fishery that might be in need of them. So, of course, I know you are active in this area. We will keep, discussion going so that we will be able to see, what comes out of Mexico, what we can lay our hand upon in Australia and share with other scholars around the world. Possibly it could be useful, maybe in the Gulf of Guinea, where Anthony, spoke about a few minutes ago. So thank you again. Any further question or comment? The time is no longer there.
Yeah, also my
Anthony,
hand was raised. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Issa. Very interesting presentation indeed. And I have one little question, and then later I'll follow up with a comment. What I would like to know is that this system, which is actually very interesting, is a system that is designed externally and then proposed to indigenous people, right? Did you get my question?
Yes, I got your question. I got your question. Yeah. So basically, this system has been operational outside the indigenous community framework. However, based on a response to tackling problems faced by the indigenous community, we were contacted, and from there we initiated a project on this. So this project was designed together with the indigenous, the MCG group. And because the MCG group are not the core indigenous people, they're like a community group, like the one we have in Africa, like the community group that works down with the indigenous community. And as well, they serve as intermediary between the core indigenous people and the government. So, and they are also indigenous people. They are indigenous people there in the MCG. Okay. So we're able to work together to design the project to see the possibility of tackling some of these problems through exploring this innovative approach. And for example, if you're conversant with the situation in Canada, we have seen the Marshall rule, whereby the indigenous community are given the right based on the Supreme Court rule to explore their resources. Yet the government has not given them the absolute control. And the reason why we are talking about a certification will be that if they're able to gather some control of these resources, that they can explore this certification to have a label that will allow them to harness external market, because the lobster fishery is highly sought after and there's high demand. And you can see my statistics that is being exported to the US, China, in other parts of the world. And it's a species that is huge in size, and it can be explored, and it can be even exported in various forms, be it live, frozen, and even processed. So that is the brief response to the question. Thanks so much, Anthony.
Okay, so my follow-up. Thanks for the response. I really get it now. And I would just say that we in Africa, we really need your expertise, because I mean, you can get from my presentation, and I believe that the case of Cameroon is not Cameroon is not isolated in this kind of problems. And so I think we would need the kind of expertise which you bring in order to be able to implement such approaches in Africa. And yeah, having said that, I actually wanted to contact you when I saw your response to Olusola's invitation. And so I just thought that maybe today would be the best time to do that. And I am the coordinator for the ECOP Africa. And so I thought that we could I would contact you so that we start working together to bring some of our expertise and our knowledge to the continent through ACOPS. And so I just use this opportunity to address the invitation to you right now.
Yeah, that'll be fine. And congratulations to the booklet that was just published. I think it was launched during the WAMSA program, and I'm glad to also be a contributor to the booklet. So so it was a nice one.
So I'll get back to you by email.
Okay, thank you guys for this exchange. I just allow you to have this discussion. We are very grateful for your participation. I will take last word from Christian. And one of the reasons why we have this meeting is to bring people together because the problems, the challenges are huge. So as many people as we have, we'll be able to work together to find solution to the problem, which is equally beyond Africa. So if there is no one else who would like to ask any question, I will leave the floor to Christian to remind us the objective of this gathering so that we can move on from there after this meeting. Christian, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Well, first of all, I'm not sure if either Sophia or Angela may have any question, any comment. Please don't be shy. Just write in the chat if there is anything. You are more than welcome to leave us a comment or a particular question. Especially today that we are a small group, so please don't be shy to ask or comment. But meanwhile, I would just for sure say thank you to all the time and effort from you guys to prepare the presentations and to be here today. As I said, yes, we are a small group, but I talk from experience when I say that starting from little groups, it still can make things grow bigger. I mentioned already yesterday that the previous session in OBPS we had more than 40 people. It's people that we can still contact because they have been already providing inputs to the community. People from different levels, from the management levels to the technical levels that have been already present in the previous session. So this list of contact is there. Sola will have it, if not already, and we expect to keep building the community from here on. There is, as I said, this issue of the perspective paper that would be a very good starting point for a possible task team into OBPS to move forward for moving forward all the aspects related to convergence and adoption and creation of best practices around fisheries. So you guys are definitely more than welcome to join this group and to take a leadership in making this happen. I really appreciated the fact that today we were discussing a lot on small scale fisheries, that it's an issue that for sure wasn't treated in depth during the last workshop. So yeah, I think that has been a very valuable contribution, and I look very much forward to see you guys hopefully involved in OBPS. I don't think at this point I have anything else to say, Sola. We are already exceeded for 20 minutes the expected time, which is fine to me, but I'm not sure if by you guys it is. So.
Okay, we have to round up now. I just got a message from Sophia that she doesn't have a question, and then I hope Angela also does.
Sola, we lost you for a moment.
So thank you, everyone. Before we quickly, briefly turn on our camera so that Christian can take a kind of a good picture, if you don't mind.
Let's take another picture then. Let's see. Just a second. Okay. So just smile, please. Okay, I got it.
So thank you, everyone. Please, I will request that Dr. Issa and Dr. Anthony kindly please, as soon as possible, could you please share with us, myself and Christian, your presentation? We need to provide a kind of a short report to OBPS. So kindly share it with me and Christian. You have the Christian email already on some of the email we have exchanged. We're very grateful if you can do that as soon as possible. So thank you very much. The OBPS workshop continues until 19. You can still join several other teams and participate. You're very much welcome. This discussion does not end now, it continues. So if you have other ideas, please send a mail. Like you are aware, task team is the next thing that will be set up, particularly to work on the perspective paper. So it's good, we are small. It's also not good that we don't have much people, but the little at the close number we have, we want to make use of this close relationship that we have with each other. So Sophia, we're grateful we're joining us, and Angela. So we would like to also have to reach out to you and then see what you can do with us in the next coming month. Thank you, everyone. Grateful for your participation. Thank you again from my end. Au revoir. Take care and bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
And Christian, for the perspective paper, maybe once you have maybe a coordination team going for the paper, we can start working on it and maybe have meetings and talk about what to do and how to move forward.
Well, I'm so glad that you're mentioning this. So definitely, since Sola was also very, very interested in leading this process, I am sure that I would really love to see you guys making this move forward, and count me in for facilitating you the playground, possible connections, and even though facilitate and help you to create this task team into the system. I would be more than happy to move this forward with you, and we can even start tackling this before the workshop is finished this week. So I am available for you in case you want to meet during the workshop. We can still meet us here in this room and keep working on that. So, but I leave it to you guys to wanting to do it, and then I'll be very happy to join you. But yes, nothing would make me happier. Thank you, Anthony, for this final edition.
Okay, right.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Good evening. Very nice to meet you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.